Hi, I'm Katie Kurtz, and I'm a writer in Seattle.
Hi, Katie. I'm Elvin Jones, and I'm an artist, a dancer, and a teacher in Seattle.
It's really nice being with you here today, uh, wherever here is for us. Where is here for you?
Well, here for me is I'm sitting in my study in my house in West Seattle.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your dance background. You spend time in the Caribbean, correct? In Haiti in particular, is that right?
Well, yes. Why I went to the Caribbean was my mom passed away about 6 years ago, and she left a little savings for me. And so I decided that I would take my dance exploration into the Caribbean. But that was not that wasn't my idea in isolation. That's an idea that came to me because I'm in a community of people who dance together. I'm an honorary member of a dance company in the Bay Area called Ra Ra Tulame. And then my honorary membership came out of the relationship that I engendered with um, the artistic director, Portia Jefferson. And we've been friends now for over 12 years. And but the friendship came as a result of my study and practice of the Catherine Dunham technique and my inquiry about a particular dance step called Yambalu. And Yambalu is a reverent um, movement that is one of the temple dances from the Vodun. And in the dance, the spine ripples, and much like a snake. And the dance is also part of a reverent dance for the one of the deities in the Vodun pantheon. His name is Dambala, and he's the snake god. So, anyways, I had the word Yambalu in my brain years and years ago, and but I didn't have all of the context that I needed, and I was teaching the Dunham technique beginning level at the university in Sacramento at Cal State University. And so I went to the computer and I did a search on Yambalu, and I found a YouTube video of a woman dancing this dance step, Yambalu. It's very complex. The technique behind it is multi-layered. It's polyrhythmic um, and just gorgeous. It looks effortless, but there's a lot of understanding. So I was looking at this video and I recognized the dance studio that this person, Janan Saint-Just, was using in her demonstration. It was the ODC dance studio in San Francisco. So, because I was in Sacramento, just an hour and a half or so away, I said, let me look and see ODC and see if there's any classes in Haitian dance. And maybe Janan is teaching there. And what I found that very night was a dance class by Blanche Brown, a woman who is still with us. She's an octogenarian. And so she had retired from teaching Haitian dance, but then she had reinvigorated her practice and was teaching a class that very night. So I got in my car and I drove to San Francisco. And that night I took a dance class, and we didn't do Yambalu. We did another Haitian dance called Banda, very celebratory dance that is very reverent. You really have to feel yourself, be
Mm.
with yourself. And in that dance class came Portia Jefferson. She was taking the dance class also. And so I noticed her and we became friends from that class, and I went back the next week. She was substitute teaching, and then we've been friends ever since. But I have to answer your question about why I'm going to the Caribbean. Because of my relationship with Portia Jefferson over these years, and her study and dedication to these ancient dances from the Haitian pantheon, which
And is that connected? I thought I read somewhere to the West African diaspora.
Yes, absolutely. Because of the slave trade, and because in Haiti, the practices, the sacred practices, were able to be kept by certain members of different tribes. There were the Mai and people from the Congo, and people Yoruba and the Igbo, and different groups of people were able to retain some of their motherland practices from West and Central Africa, Angola. And so the Haitian island became a repository for these practices, combined with Indian native knowledge, and also, of course, the Spanish and French colonizing influence.
Mm.
There was a rich practice, and that then came through the Vodun religion. So because of Yambalu, I met Portia Jefferson, and then our friendship deepened. And after my mom passed, she had been going regularly to Haiti. I called her and I said, "Are you taking a trip?" She said, "Yes, come with me." So we went not once, but 2 years in a row in the summer to go to dance workshops, and first to Jacmel, Haiti, which is an interesting artist colony there. And then we took a trip to Cuba the following year. And after Cuba, we went to New Orleans. And after New Orleans, we went to Benin, Africa. And that trip was last year. We probably will not take a trip this summer.
I'm sorry. So is it fair to say that your dance practice is an embodied archive of sorts, of a long lineage of dance practices through the centuries?
I think that's fair to say that the rhythms that come from West and Central Africa are contained within my body through practice and through serious dedication to really looking at the art, at the forms, and then practicing. Sometimes I'm more successful than not. I feel a little removed from the Haitian dance practice here, although because of Zoom, I'm taking a class from a studio in New York tomorrow morning.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, the polyrhythmic. I'm really into West African music and guitars specifically. And last year I saw Vieux Farka Touré perform, son of Ali Farka Touré, and that was just incredible. And I've been wanting to understand more about that particular sound, because there's something to it that is just so textured and complicated. And I I think about it a lot.
Yes.
And so speaking of sons, so your father, Elvin Jones, he was a jazz drummer with Mingus and Sonny Rollins, and most famously Coltrane on A Love Supreme. is his rhythmic style, do you feel like that is a part of your practice as well?
Well, that's a complicated question, only because my father was he developed his particular way of playing that came out of a time in our collective history where people really had to make do with what they had. Now, I say all that to say something came through my father's spirit, and whether that's mystical or practical, there or a mixture of the two. I think he was encouraged to. He was the youngest child in a family of um, 12 or 14 children, and he was one. He was a twin,
Hmm.
so he had, and I have since learned that twins. There's a high significance of the idea of twins in the West African um, religious practice. But that's neither here nor there. But what I say about that is that my father, that his twin passed at a very young age from whooping cough, and
Mm.
they both had whooping cough, and his twin, his name was Alvin with an A, and I think what happened in that family is that all the love just got poured onto Elvin, and he, plus his genius, allowed him to really develop his style at a young age. Now, I will say that as I was raised primarily by my mother, um, in we lived in San Francisco for a period of time when I was born, and and then we moved to the Sacramento when I was 6, and then I was raised primarily in Sacramento. Uh, but I too was encouraged to really explore m- my prowess with movement. I always loved to move and to dance, and I would study artists like Michael Jackson on our little black and white TV,
Mhm.
and just be really responsive to the tenor of the times that I was growing up in, late 60s, early 70s, and all of that wonderful music that was coming through. So, but my relationship with my father was one that I had to really, um, a lot of times, imagine because he wasn't around physically. He had uh, he he had to really dedicate his life to his music,
Yeah.
and and so it took me a long time to really understand that. But once I did, and in my mid 20s, we really began to have a kind of a relationship. I would go to see him when he was closer to me, playing gigs, and and we would talk on the phone occasionally. But that there's something there, that I'm still trying to, in my artistry, reconcile. My relationship with my father, rhythmically, and in the in the spirit of fathers and sons.
Mhm.
Deep question, because in there is the interference. Okay, if I'm an African person, which I consider myself an African person living in America, there's this interference that happened through African people being brought here, and the slave trade and Reconstruction and Jim Crow, and the times we're living in today are very telling that we've yet really to reconcile this deep question of how the African can live in the United States, um, to live and thrive and love and be at peace, and um, and so, you know I think my father was dealing with those kinds of questions through his artistry, and in a way, I'm also doing similar exploration.
In the portrait of you, there's so much to talk about there, but I want to talk about the Black Lives Matter sign in the window and just acknowledge that today is Saturday, and Saturday, May 9th, yesterday, there was um, the news came out this week about Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed vigilante style by two white men in Georgia. And I just would like to kind of check in with you about that and see how you're feeling around that and your thoughts with what's happening with kind of the bigger picture right now. You know, we have so many layers of stress, and there's an additional layer for you and your community. How are you feeling about that?
Uh, at the root of social justice is Black justice. If we cannot get it together to see that Black people have the same civil rights as anybody else, and I mean everywhere and all kinds of ways, from housing justice to economic justice, and we're seeing very clearly that the practice of uh, the terrorizing practice of lynching has not gone away. In fact, it may be somehow amplified. Um, but uh, so how I'm feeling is, I saw a list recently of someone had put together a list of basically, um, and I don't like to repost these things on my social media because to, sometimes, for example, the video of this man's murder, I won't watch. I know it's been tried to, it's been shown and then reshown, and I don't really understand. For me, it's highly triggering to see it. Uh, I it just there's it just it's hard. It's hard to look at. Okay, but but what I was saying is in 2012 when Trayvon Martin was murdered, and I was um, sort of finishing my master's degree in education, trying to figure out ways in which I could work in the community and feel like I'm contributing towards something that was hopeful and um, relevant and connected to the spirit of something that was beyond just wordsmithing and giving lip service. So I spent time, really trying to figure out this question. Meanwhile, as I'm spending my time trying to figure out, we've seen this kind of terrorism play out year after year after year, and if it's not church bombing or school shooting or mall shoot, we the sovereignty of the Black person in this place, this so-called United States, um, we have not reconciled that. And this is another example, and it makes me, sort of shake to even talk about it. But I'm imagining in my shaking how this man's family feels. Let's just drop down and just look at the family. Like they are imagining that this person they're pouring their hope and love into this man. And he's just doing something good for himself, jogging down the street to shake off, whatever, or to encourage himself in a particular way, to just be in his own place. And two people who may represent, and I just have to say this, they may represent a system of thinking in this place, the United States. Um, they decide to rub him out, take his life, snuff him. To for what? For what? And it brings a lot of emotion to me just to even ask that question, like, why? What? What is the? And we keep asking this question. James Baldwin was asking this question in his KQED. Beautiful. All of this footage is on YouTube. You can just see he's asking the question, what is the price of blackness in America? And why do we have 2020 asking this question? In some ways, I'm willing to, in my art, in that photograph, maybe there's a way that I'm trying to hold on to my sovereignty, my sense of reverence for existence. And if I can just, like we, I believe in the peace movement, and I believe in that everyone has their right to be. And I think it's imperative that we stop to think about how Black people are viewed in this country and how they are allowed or not to exist. This nonsense about shoving people back into the factories because we have to have a certain kind of economic stability, if that's why. And then who are these people who are working in the factories? They are the working class. They are brown and Black and poor white.
And a lot of these, I mean, the perpetrators of that lynching, terrorists, let's just say that, the massive disconnect there is that they are oppressed by the very same system and they don't know. And that's the part that, for me, as a white person, that I have struggled with.
As we all are trying to conjure solutions or imagine solutions, I guess what keeps me grounded in as I continue to just sort of unpack the question of why, and it are just my immediate relationships, like the people I work with, yes, the people I'm in dance community with, yes, the, the the relationships also to the immaterial and to the spiritual, whether that is just looking at a flower. I'm saying like that keeps me grounded in just trying to figure out what my next steps are, in terms of how I'm going to engender a conversation. Um, this has come up uh, in my work recently, and I noticed a couple of things, without being in any way specific, but I just want to just mention what happens for me internally in this body is, first, and I'll just sort of sketch out what happens, what has happened is I am a tall, dark-skinned man, Black identified. I'm biracial. I'm Black identified. Uh, I live in Seattle, and I work in an institution, a private institution, education, um, and so there's a socioeconomic understanding that I'm trying to bridge and um, and take notice of. The What has happened is that I notice in myself that sometimes it feels like um, I don't want my talents to be objectified or somehow I'm used um, as a spokesperson for a lot. I am one person, like I'm one Black person. I am connected to a community of people, and so I find myself being cautious around how I'm lending my talents, just my skill set. And part of my skill set is magical. There's a part of what I do that is not um, cannot be quantified. I'll just say it like that. There's a qualitative presence that I have that I know about. It's in my lived experiences we've been talking about. And that has a lot of value. It has a lot of value for me as a person. And so then I've just been finding myself in an inner dialogue and figuring out how to navigate and lend my authenticity, but also be aware of how other people may or may not view me. And the only way to know is to actually just sit down and drop down and talk to the individual. And it takes a lot of time,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time. And there's no substitute either for just a one on one drop down.
Yeah.
And from there, I'm feeling like I'm building and feeling more affirmed and that and that there's a reciprocal understanding. Oh, we hear that in my father's drumming, for example, and he always talked about it in how um, he said they never talked. He and John Coltrane, they never talked about what they were going to do. It all came through telepathy. I found the same thing that happens on the dance floor when you are. It could happen in a nightclub. It could happen in a dance studio. But when you're in the pocket, rhythmically, harmonically, there's something about the rhythm, but that same rhythm can happen through the heart connection, same way. And that's like where I try to anchor my understanding.
And do you feel that heart connection is available to us now through screens? Like, I mean, we're in a space of having to do this through technology, and do you think those connections will still be made?
It's a great question. I don't know. I think I'm beginning to wonder because I've been in a lot of Zoom meetings, 2 or 3 a day, or other um, video meetings, not ascribing to one particular organization, but different. But the platform of the it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. I live with a person. I am in so much gratitude because we can stand in the same room and look at each other and feel the resonation that comes from a back and forth. It's not, you cannot replicate it through these electrons. It just, for me, it doesn't quite vibe the same. Now, what it does do is it puts an insistence on how we're using our words and how we're being very clear with our language. For me, that has a lot of value. And then I feel like, well, okay, maybe this is a chance for us to get some foundational work in so that when we are able to connect in and share in real time, then we can get into that drop down where we can see and hear and feel each other um, through our compassion.
And your portrait is so stunning. And for a variety of reasons, a lot of people responded to it pretty quickly, like, this is a Renaissance painting. But it's also, I mean, this is the first time I'm meeting you, but even in that portrait, I got a sense of how you move in the world. And do you feel the portrait has captured you, like the very essence of you?
Um, there's there's an Africanist quality called the mask of the cool, and that is you see it in performance and in art. Literally, the the face becomes a place of coolness, of stillness. There may be a lot of work happening. For example, if my father's a drummer, he was working 1,000 times, but his face maintained a certain. So what I'm saying is, do I yes, there are elements in that the photograph is 100% constructed because it's my living room. You get a peek into my living room, and I have sort of shrines. My whole house is a shrine for various reasons. And so what you get to see is the sort of layers of how I've put together my collection of myself, but a snapshot of me. It's not all of me, but it's some elements. For example, there's a philodendron in the background, a plant. That plant is my mother.
Mm.
Literally, I took some of her ashes and some of my dog Ella's ashes. This dog was of high significance, and I planted them in this pot with a cutting from my mother's plant. And I've lived with this philodendron my entire life. She had that. And so now that's 6 years later, and it's enormous. And I like to say my mother and my companion animal are becoming a philodendron there. And so there's a way that there's all kinds of ways to think about that metaphor of not only my ancestry having my back, but this ancestry is also alive and moving. And that is also true about African art. If it isn't in action, it needs to be um, used. It's a dynamic. There's a dynamic quality to the African person, the African aesthetic, the African philosophy. It needs to be. You can't really. That's why Europe is busy returning all of the African artifacts that are locked up in museums because um, Africa needs those artifacts. Actually, need to be used in ceremony. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
But back to the photograph. Uh, there's layers in there that reflect my understanding of myself and my place in the world, my responsibility as um, as a reverent human being. I'm reverent to my ancestry, and I'm reverent to the idea of how I'm moving my energy and my gifts forward for the greater good of our culture, um, as 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 a society of human beings, and that is something that I'm carrying with me as a I guess to say as a responsibility.
As a responsibility and as a legacy. And just wondering how are there ways that you're transmitting that legacy and uh, carrying it forward?
Yes, you know that's a great question. I have been for a period of time in a bit of a retreat place from performing, and um, and I took a few years where I didn't do any teaching either. Now I'm finding a rhythm with teaching and with in conjunction with um, taking class and making sure that I'm, you know, um, feeding uh, my own sensibilities artistically. So uh, there's more brewing in me, and I love that the photograph and the connection with Stephen Miller came at a time where I'm in deep contemplation just on these questions about how what my responsibility is and what I'm doing about it. So there's more yet to be explored, I think, in that idea of what I'm doing about it.
And are you in currently in collaboration with anybody or conceiving any projects, or you're still in the kind of retreat gestation?
Um, there are some collaborations through my working relationships as it pertains to working at this school. But professionally, no. I mean, the photograph was a collaboration with Stephen Miller, and uh, I have um philosophical collaborations with really dear friends where we just get together and talk about all the nuances of Black dance in America. But more, I'm opening up to more possibilities of collaboration, particularly now as I can connect through the electronosphere rather instantaneous. I just watched Alvin Ailey has been releasing some of their archive dances through uh, collaboration with the Public Library in New York. And so I just watched for the first time Judith Jamison dancing her original and inaugural role in Cry, the ballet that Alvin Ailey made for the Black woman in America, and really through three movements shows a certain dynamic understanding of Black women. And at least that's the intention of the dance. And watching Judith Jamison do the movement was so moving personally, and I think that's what art has the power to do is to really move a person. It can happen now when it happens in the theater. My mentor, one of my mentors, Kevin Iega Jeff, used to say to us as we were preparing for concerts in Chicago, late 90s, he would say, you have the power to move the molecules in this room and to really affect change on that level. And I believe that about dance. I really do. I've seen it happen. I've felt it in my own self, and I felt it in temples. I felt it um, uh, in nightclubs. I've felt it in theaters, and it's a spiritual drop down feeling that can occur when the spirit of the dance comes on you. And that can be casual or a very formal occasion. But the spirit of the dance can come through. And I'm wondering if it did come through. Like I was watching Ms. Jameson do this dance and I felt it. But it goes back to that earlier point where it's just not quite the same. So the future of dance is hopeful because artists are some creative people. Like who could have thought of let's take some photographs through the windows of the people to get a snapshot of what's happening inside an interior landscape. Now, um, I know I've also seen some line dances from Detroit where a whole neighborhood of black folks are doing this wonderful line dance to the music of Luther Vandross, and but they are spaced not 6 feet apart, but plenty, more than that. But doing the line dance all down the sidewalk, you see 5 or 6 black folks doing the in perfect sync, but everybody's got their own flavor. And that's the thing. That's the thing about dance that needs to be practiced and activated. Like everybody has their own flavor, their own approach, their own, and that's the story of humanity. We're all necessary.
Have you seen the video of the Italian dancer in the street taking out the garbage?
Oh yes, I did see that. Really.
And then just everybody on the balcony just cheering wildly. And then you can see for him too that exchange was just so critical to the feeling, but you could just see like this is somebody who's been contained, and then he just went for it. And I feel like that's just happening so much right now, is that a shift in people's willingness to be vulnerable, to be open, to be out there, to really connect in this new, deeper, more powerful way.
Yes, I watched that video of that man, and I was like, oh my god. Now you asked me a question earlier about my artistic ideas and how they're transmitting, and I didn't tell you something, but I'm just I'll say it because I've been setting up my camera and making videos when when the spirit moves me. Now, sometimes it's in response to some music that I've been listening to. And I try to make it so that, I'm not, but it's difficult because there's a certain kind of self consciousness that comes from pressing start and end. But one day I made a dance video. It was raining. This was in mid-April, early April, when we had some storms coming through. And I set the camera up outside, and I made I took 3 shots near, close up, a medium, and a far away shot, and I just danced to the sounds of these beautiful bird song, and then the raindrops falling into my garden. So I called it garden dance, which I've been having an intention about for a few years about making garden dances. And so sometimes my release has to happen in my garden where I just dance, but there's still this self-consciousness about turning on the camera. I love that man's video because he didn't have those concerns. Like he just went for his truth, and thank God somebody recorded it and we got to take a peek into that and feel a certain, I was able to feel a certain release just
Yeah.
watching.
And unself-consciousness of being recorded. This has been really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's been a great talk.